Hey, it's Brian. Let's talk about asthma. Asthma treatment can be a bit tricky with different guidelines and treatment tracks and alternatives, so we're going to focus on the preferred options for most patients. We'll primarily reference GINA, which is the Global Initiative for Asthma, but also NAEPP, the National Asthma Education and Prevention Program, is helpful too. Asthma is characterized by chronic, reversible airway inflammation and bronchoconstriction. This inflammation is primarily due to neutrophils, eosinophils, lymphocytes, mast cells, and/or epithelial injury. When airway thickening occurs, it leads to the symptoms that we typically see: shortness of breath, wheezing, cough, and chest tightness. And then as asthma progresses, you may see airway edema, hyperresponsiveness, and also remodeling. Symptoms are typically worse at night, and the typical patient that we think of is a pediatric patient or someone younger. There are a lot of different triggers: cigarettes, allergens like pollen, dust, pet dander, cockroaches, perfumes, viral or respiratory infections, changes in weather, exercise, genetics may play a component, and then also medications, specifically non-selective beta blockers, aspirin, and NSAIDs. There are several different ways to document variability in someone's expiratory lung function. However, we're going to focus on the most common and probably simplest. When diagnosing asthma, you're going to consider symptoms and then FEV1, which is the amount of air that somebody can get out in the first 1 second. So we're going to look for an FEV1 that improves by greater than 12% after using a SABA. And in those that are 12 or older, that improvement also needs to be greater than 200 milliliters. The NAEPP also talks about using exhaled nitric oxide measurements, but GINA doesn't seem to really like it that much. There are different phenotypes for how patients are going to present with asthma. Allergic asthma is the most common and easily recognized phenotype. It often presents in childhood and is associated with a family history of allergic rhinitis, eczema, and food or drug allergies. Eosinophilic airway inflammation is likely too, and this type responds really well to inhaled corticosteroids. Non-allergic asthma is not associated with an allergy, and thus it has a lower response to ICS. Adult onset is more common in women and is often a type of non-allergic asthma. Persistent airflow limitation occurs when someone has asthma for a long time, and it can actually become irreversible due to remodeling of the airways. And then finally, obesity can produce an inflammatory response and also put added pressure on the airways. In terms of our treatment goals, we want patients to avoid bothersome symptoms and maintain a high quality of life. We want to see little to no reliever use. So this does not include using a SABA for preventing exercise-induced bronchoconstriction. So generally using a SABA or rescue inhaler 2 times per week or less. We want to avoid exacerbations. So the goal is going to be 0 or 1 per year. We want to normalize lung function as measured by having a FEV1 greater than 80% of predicted. And then we want to minimize the risk of mortality and side effects from medications. Generally, we want to do routine follow-up at least once a year to review symptoms, to identify modifiable risk factors, and also measure lung function. Also, at every visit, you want to assess inhaler technique, adherence, the written asthma action plan, and the goals of treatment. So in general, when someone's not at goal and we make a change, we want to reevaluate them in 2 to 6 weeks. If someone has been stable for 2 to 3 months, that's when we can consider stepping down treatment. And then for all patients, we want to avoid all those triggers that we talked about previously and make sure patients are up to date with their vaccines. So with asthma, it's a continuous cycle of reviewing with patients their symptoms. Have they had exacerbations? Are they having any medication side effects? Assessing and re-educating them on inhaler technique, adherence, and then adjusting their treatments, adjusting those risk factors. And the cycle just continues on and on and on. All patients are going to have a written asthma action plan. And this is essentially just formally written down instructions on what they're going to do on a daily basis. So, this is their maintenance medications, what they're going to use, rescue inhaler. You also want to have written down what to do if they have some symptoms, specific medications that they're going to use, and then also what to do in terms of an emergency. The reason that we have this is, think of the typical asthma patient. It's a young child. So if they're going to a neighbor's house to play, or when they're at school, it's going to be important to make it easy for everybody just to have everything written down. What does the patient need to do on a regular basis? What to do if something seems wrong, if they have symptoms? And then as part of this, it's also important to provide additional information on trigger avoidance, symptoms to watch for, and then you can also include information on peak flow readings. This table is modified from the NAEPP and it's simplified. And this is how we can determine or categorize someone's asthma. So it's considered intermittent depending on a few different factors. So first of all, it depends on the age. So for the sake of this, let's just focus on those that are 5 through adulthood. So it's considered intermittent if there's 2 or fewer night awakenings per month. SABAs are used 2 times per week or less. And then also FEV1 predicted is greater than 80%. So generally for these patients, treatment is going to be step 1. Then as symptoms become more regular, patients are classified as persistent. So it is mild if night awakenings are 3 to 4 times per month. They're using a SABA more than 2 days a week, but not daily. And FEV1 predicted is still greater than 80%. It moves up to moderate as symptoms become more bothersome, more permanent. So these patients are having night awakenings at least weekly. They're using their rescue inhaler daily, and their FEV1 predicted drops down in the 60 to 80% range. And finally, severe persistent. patients are waking up most days of the week. They're using their SABA several times a day. Their FEV1 predicted is terrible, less than 60%. So there's different steps kind of depending on what's going on with the patient. And it's important to note that the severity is determined before someone starts treatment. And this is a good chart to know. However, GINA doesn't use this anymore, and the GINA treatments are what we're going to mostly rely on. What GINA does is they now recommend assessing asthma severity retrospectively based on the treatment needed to control a patient's asthma. So it's considered mild asthma if they're on a PRN, low-dose ICS, and formoterol, and or on a low-dose ICS. If they're on a low-dose ICS, but they also need a LABA, that's considered moderate. And then if they need a high-dose ICS with a LABA, or their symptoms are uncontrolled, that's considered severe asthma. And if someone's uncontrolled, then you need to reassess their risk factors, their adherence, their inhaler technique, all of those things to help us get them controlled. With that bit of background information, we can now move on to pharmacotherapy. For a PRN rescue inhaler, this is still a bit mind-boggling to me. There used to be a box warning that using an ICS-LABA combo could increase the risk of sudden death during an acute asthma exacerbation. However, there have been a couple studies now that compared using a PRN SABA, so for example, albuterol, versus using PRN low-dose ICS with formoterol. They also looked at comparing it to maintenance therapy, but that's kind of beyond the scope of what I want to talk about here. The main takeaway here is that using that new low-dose ICS formoterol instead of just a SABA actually decreased the risk of severe exacerbations by 55 to 64%. So that's why GINA really pushes the use of that combination over our more traditional SABAs now. Let's look at the treatment recommendations based on the 2022 GINA guidelines. So as you'll see, we have a preferred track, an alternative, and then options you can consider for either track. And note that this is for adults and children that are at least 12 years old. So starting off on the left here with our preferred track, remember that the preferred PRN option now is the low-dose ICS with formoterol. Compare that with the alternative, where the PRN is, you can still use the SABA, it's just not as good as reducing exacerbations. And note that if you start on a track, you don't have to stay there. You can switch between tracks if you need to. So let's keep this pretty simple. So step one for these adults and older children, these are patients who are having symptoms less than 4 or 5 times per week. So they're just going to do their PRN, low-dose ICS, and formoterol. If someone is having symptoms most days of the week, then you can jump up to adding a maintenance treatment, which is a low-dose ICS with formoterol, so basically taking their PRN medication and just making it scheduled. If you need to step up, or if patients are having symptoms daily and low lung function, then you can jump up to step 4, which is just increasing their ICS from low to medium dose. And then if you need to step up from there, you can consider different things. LABA, referring to a specialist. You could also increase them to high-dose ICS or even a monoclonal antibody. In terms of the alternate track, I don't want to spend too much time on this because you should really be on the preferred track when you can. And then in terms of options for other tracks, I don't think this is super important to really focus on. You can just do different doses of ICS, basically jumping up in ICS a little bit quicker. You can add a Leukotriene receptor antagonist. You can add sublingual immunotherapy and things like that. Once you get down to step 5, some kind of last line, patients are doing terrible type things, you can add azithromycin, a Leukotriene, or even a low-dose oral corticosteroid. For our younger population, so this is children 6 to 11, the recommendations are a little bit different. This still comes from GINA, so you don't necessarily have to choose the low-dose ICS or formoterol just due to lack of evidence and study with this age population. So you can use either PRN option. So a little bit different here. So step 1, these are the patients who are having symptoms less than 2 times per month. You're going to give an ICS whenever the SABA is used. For step 2, these are those who have symptoms 2 times a month or more. You're going to add a maintenance low-dose ICS. Daily symptoms, or if you need to step up to step 3, you have several options. So you can take that low-dose ICS and add LABA to it. You can increase the ICS to medium dose, or you can use a very low-dose ICS with formoterol scheduled. Jumping up to step 4, so these are patients typically with daily symptoms and also have low lung function. You're going to skip and go to medium dose ICS with a LABA or low-dose ICS with formoterol. And then kind of your last line here for stage 5, you can refer, and then you can also consider high-dose ICS with LABA or potentially a monoclonal antibody. And then at each of these steps, you have other options. So if you want to add, for example, let's look at step 3. So for maintenance, you can do a low-dose ICS with a Leukotriene receptor antagonist. However, this is not as effective as doing an ICS with a LABA, so you probably shouldn't do that if you don't have to. Similarly, in step 4, you can add a LAMA. It's just not as effective as some of our other options. So it's interesting to look at this compared to COPD. Just in general, for all patients, asthma, ICS is going to be your go-to, and LAMA is kind of the last line, at least for inhaled medications. Whereas if you think of COPD, it's the opposite. You're doing LABAs and LAMAs first, and then reserving ICSs for patients that have more of those elevated eosinophils. One thing that's pretty cool in the GINA guidelines is they now have recommendations that are specific to treating exacerbations in the doctor's office. So if you have a patient in the office for an exacerbation, you're going to do a SABA. The dose is pretty unique here. So 4 to 10 puffs every 20 minutes for an hour. You can also give the steroid prednisolone. The doses are different, obviously, between adults and kids. And then also supplemental oxygen if needed, trying to reach these specific targets based on the age. Then if the patient responds to those treatments and they can be discharged home, they're going to continue their PRN treatments. You're probably going to end up stepping up therapy. You're going to readdress inhaler technique and adherence, and then go ahead and continue that prednisolone for up to a week for adults and up to 5 days for children. However, if patients are not responding to the treatment in office or their symptoms are severe, so things like they can't talk very clearly, their respiratory rate is greater than 30, there's evidence that they're having to use their accessory muscles to breathe, heart rate is above 120, O2 sats less than 90%, things like that, or in life-threatening situations, patient may present as very drowsy, have altered mental status, or have silent chest, which is super concerning because in that scenario, they're not even having shortness of breath or wheezing, but very obviously not being able to breathe. So these patients are going to go to the hospital. So kind of the more acute treatment for these severe patients, go ahead and add protropium to albuterol and give it in a nebulizer. You can consider IV magnesium, and then they're going to need systemic corticosteroids as well. A lot of kids and athletes can have their asthma exacerbated by exercise. This is called exercise-induced bronchoconstriction, and it's usually brought on by strenuous activity. So it usually does not occur with short bursts of activity that you would see in sports like baseball, football, or sprinting. It's usually in more oxygen-demanding activity, so long-distance running or sports that you're constantly running, maybe soccer or basketball. It can also be affected by cold and dry air. And then for swimmers, the chlorine can also precipitate bronchoconstriction. So in terms of preventing this non-pharmacologically, you want to make sure that you have a proper warm-up. There is some evidence for use of a heat exchange mask, and then also reduce sodium intake. Then before engaging in these activities that you know are going to exacerbate asthma, you can go ahead and do your rescue inhaler as a preventative treatment 15 minutes before. There's also evidence for using the mast cell stabilizer cromolyn beforehand. And then in terms of maintenance therapies, just being on an ICS and potentially a leukotriene receptor antagonist can help prevent this bronchoconstriction. If someone is having symptoms or exacerbation despite these maintenance therapies, then you would consider stepping up the maintenance ICS. So now going through the individual types of medications, our quick relief or rescue inhalers, the low-dose ICS with formoterol is going to be the preferred option for those 12 and older. So if you just go into Lexicomp and search for formoterol and look for one with an ICS, you're basically just finding Symbicort here. The 20 or the 206 dose is not available in the US, but that was studied in some of the trials that looked at the benefits over SABAs. One new medication is this albuterol budesonide combination. This was approved early on in 2023. So this was before the GINA update. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when they update again to see if that's going to show up as a recommended option or alternative. Our traditional SABAs, so albuterol and levalbuterol. And then you also have ipratropium. It's less effective than the SABAs, but in severe acute asthma, adding it to a SABA actually reduces the risk of hospitalization. Unlike with COPD, for asthma, we're going to start with ICS or inhaled corticosteroids first. They're the backbone of treatment. So these simply are anti-inflammatory agents, but they have a ton of benefits for asthma patients. That's why you'll see them in all of the treatment tracks. They decrease exacerbations, decrease hospitalizations, and decrease the risk of death. They greatly improve symptoms, they improve lung function, and then they can also prevent those exercise-induced bronchoconstriction events. Remember, the side effect that probably everybody already knows is it can cause thrush, so patients need to rinse with water and spit after using these medications. There's also an increased risk of pneumonia and local effects, pain in the mouth, hoarse voice, irritation, things like that. But really, thrush is what we're most concerned about in terms of day-to-day patient management. Listed on the screen are the available inhaled corticosteroids. They're pretty easy to pick out. Just look for the medications that end in azone or onide, and good bet that that's going to be an ICS. Some of these are available as standalone inhalers or nebulizers, and then they also come in different combinations, as you can see on the screen. But not all ICSs are the same. So thinking back to the treatment track, it doesn't say pick an ICS. It specifies if you want to pick a low dose one, a medium dose, or a high dose. So this can be super hard to memorize. So this may be a good time to just pause the video and stare at the screen and try to commit as much of it to memory as possible. Note that the top box is for ages 12 and older. The bottom is for ages 6 through 11. So it depends on the different ICS, what the dose is going to be. So let's just take an example, budesonide. So for 12 and older, low dose is 200 to 400 per day. Then when you get above 400 to 800, that's medium, and then greater than 800 is considered high dose or high potency. So overall, the doses for the younger patients, 6 to 11, they're roughly half the dose of adults and older children, but not for all of them. For example, beclomethasone is the same regardless. So again, this is a good chart to review and kind of get at least familiar with these different kinds of numbers. Moving on to LABAs, which are usually the next add-on to ICS. These stimulate beta-2 receptors in the lungs, which result in smooth muscle relaxation. Remember that Some of your patients may be taking beta blockers for other reasons. So while not required, it may be good practice to choose a beta 1 selective agent for patients with airway problems. Remember Manbabe for metoprolol, acebutolol, nebivolol, betaxolol, atenolol, bisoprolol, and esmolol. Those are going to be your beta 1 selective agents. So we add a LABA to an ICS because it improves symptoms and also lung function, although there's not much difference in exacerbations. Side effects, try to think of the opposite of what beta blockers do. So tachycardia, palpitations are common, tremors, things like that. Listed on the screen are the available options. So, these are kind of easy to pick out in that they all end in the end. Some of these are available as standalone medications and there's combinations that you can use too. So pick out the ones that have an ICS with it because we're going to need that for asthma. So Dulera is one, Symbicort, triple therapy registry, although you're probably not going to see that too much in asthma. Advair, Brio, and then also Trelegy, again, a triple therapy that you're probably not going to see too much in asthma. Our final major inhaled medication are the LAMAs. So acetylcholine normally acts on M3 muscarinic receptors in the smooth muscle that causes bronchoconstriction. So LAMAs essentially just block these effects to cause bronchodilation. They're not seen too much in asthma. There's only a very small increase in lung function and a small decrease in exacerbations. They don't really help with symptoms at all. Anticholinergic side effects are what you're going to see. So dry mouth, blurry vision, cough, things like that. And then you can see the examples on the screen. They all end with a little bit different things. So, several of them end in the IUM, but other ones like glycopyrrolate don't really follow that. So it can be a little bit trickier to pick out the LAMAs. Note the ones that have an ICS, because you're typically not going to see a LAMA used in asthma patients unless it's with an ICS. So really the only options here that have an ICS combo are the triple therapy registry and also Trelegy. Some of the newer agents that you'll see are the monoclonal antibodies. So we have an anti-IgE one, which is typically used for severe allergic asthma. We have some anti-interleukin 4 or 5 agents. They're typically reserved for severe eosinophilic asthma. And then we also have anti-thymic stromal lymphopoietin, which is kind of like interleukin 7, and that's used just for severe asthma. All of these are subcutaneous injections, except for Syncare, which is IV. You want to watch out for injection site reactions. Anytime you're doing monoclonal antibodies, you can have the development of antibodies, pain, pharyngitis. A couple of them have some unique side effects. So we have Dupixent can cause conjunctivitis and tooth pain, and then Xolair and also Syncar have anaphylaxis box warnings. Our final class of medications are the leukotriene inhibitors. By blocking leukotriene receptors, it leads to smooth muscle relaxation, decreases edema, and also decreases inflammation. So Luton is a little bit different. It doesn't block the receptors, but it blocks 5-lipoxygenase a little bit higher here. So in the end result, it basically does the same thing. It just blocks the process a little bit earlier. These are generally well tolerated, except for montelukast now has a box warning for serious neuropsychiatric events, including suicidal ideation. You're more likely to see these used in children. And kind of just the overarching theme here is they're just generally less effective than low-dose ICS or using an ICS-LABA combo. So it's preferable to go that route instead of jumping right to leukotriene inhibitors. For our devices, so most of these medications are going to be in some sort of inhaler formulation, whether it's a DPI or a meter dose inhaler. But let's say Rudy here doesn't really use his inhaler too well. He's having trouble coordinating or pushing the buttons or whatnot. So you could use a nebulizer on the left. They're pretty easy to use. You simply just put the medication in here, and then it aerosolizes it for the patient, and then they can just sit here and breathe normally through the mask and get good penetration of the medication into their lungs. On the right, you can also use a spacer, so basically a tube that attaches to the inhaler. That way, the parent on the right here can depress the device, and the child doesn't have to coordinate the pressing the button and breathing at the same time, so they can basically breathe more normally because all the medication is stuck and aerosolized here in the tube for them. So to wrap everything up, the different guidelines, the different steps, they can be a little bit difficult to memorize. So I cut out the preferred tracks for both age groups. So this is a good slide to study from if you don't want to go back through everything again. And before looking at this, just remember simply ICS is going to be the best thing for patients. And you're going to start with the lowest dose possible and keep someone on the lowest effective dose. So on the left here for the adults and the older children, you're basically going to start with PRN low dose ICS with formoterol. And then as you progress through the steps here, you're going to go from low dose ICS with formoterol to medium dose to potentially high dose, or maybe you want to add a LAMA or a monoclonal antibody or send them to a specialist. Pretty similar for the younger population on the right, except there's no strong evidence to choose a SABA over low dose ICS formoterol or vice versa. So pick either one. And then you're essentially doing the same thing. You're starting with lower doses of ICSs, then adding LABAs as you progress. Note that you'll see that LAMAs do not show up in the preferred track here for the younger population. Attached are some further readings, but remember the go-to are going to be GINA and also NAEPP. Thanks for following along and subscribing. Be sure to follow on Instagram at Apoph Academy, and then always feel free to email me if you have any questions.